And I guess that comes to the question, what is the purpose of politics? And I believe that the purpose of politics is to create the conditions for human flourishing so that every citizen has the opportunity to become the best version of themselves. And how can government help create the conditions so that every single Canadian has the opportunity to become this best version of themselves? You know, when governments coerce, censor, or use their power to force an agenda, and they are eroding and diminishing the conditions for human flourishing, I want my government to protect my rights, not to force me how to think, what to believe, or how I should express myself. Now, I have a story of when my daughters were just young. They were about maybe 4 and 5 years old. Every night we would say our prayers together, my wife, and we had 2 daughters at the time, and we would say our prayers, and at the end of the prayers, they would say their own special prayer. And they would end, and they would say, "And we pray for everyone in the world." And I said, well, I questioned them after we finished the prayer, and I said, "Really, do you also pray for the bad people?" Well, actually, they changed their prayer after that, and they said, "We pray for everyone in the world except the bad people." Now that brings up a question. Who are the good people? Who are the bad?
Santa knows.
I think Santa may know, but I think Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he summed it up pretty well when he said that the line that separates the good people from the bad runs through the heart of every individual. And that's a little bit scary. That's a little bit scary because that means that I've been guilty of dividing people and dividing, because we know that we're easily controlled if we're divided. So where does that leave me? That leaves me responsible for dividing. How many times have I said, they're liberal, they're bad, or at least I thought it? Instead, what we ought to be doing is saying, your ideas are bad. Not you. Not you. Right? And so, we have another problem. And there are people who continuously act badly. But I believe they're still not bad people. Now, because when you ask anyone in this room, if I was to ask for a show of hands, which I won't do, how many of you are good people? Everyone would put their hand up. If you went to a liberal fundraiser and you asked them, how many of you do you think are good people? They would all put their hand up. You went to a Green Party fundraisers, they would all put their hand up. They all believe they are good people. I mean, and even the most ardent leftists have good intentions. I don't doubt that. I question their judgment. Currently before Parliament, we have a bill, it's Bill C9, that wants to criminalize certain speech. This bill is supposed to be about protecting religious people from hate. But the Justice Minister was quoted as saying that there are parts of the Bible that are hateful. So in other words, Mark Miller, the Justice Minister who said these things, stated that text within the Bible is hate speech, and the government should use force to prevent Canadians from believing certain things in the Bible. This is how dangerous this is. This bill will restrict speech, religion, and freedom of thought. G.K. Chesterton, what he said, "You need not strangle a man if you can silence him." Throughout all of human history, the ones who censored speech, controlled thought, were always on the wrong side of history. The people defending free speech were always the heroes. We look at Britain right now, which is a parliamentary democracy, which is our same system. It's the same, very similar to our own system. in the past 2 years, has arrested over 20,000 individuals and charged them with so-called speech crimes, saying naughty words, offending people. You have to risk offending someone if you want to talk about substantive issues. And they are now arresting people. Bill C-9 is pushing us towards this same authoritarianism that we see right now in Britain. Now, I have a tiny bit of comfort because England and Britain have always bounced back from the brink of totalitarianism. Is it going to happen now? I don't know. What I do know is we don't want to go further down that road of totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Now, if Bill C-9 becomes law, we will certainly be faced with similar fates as our counterparts in the UK. If we hurt a politician's feelings or something opposes the government narrative, I really don't want to stress test our government anymore through this attack on free speech. Because during COVID, we saw how the government asked big tech to censor anyone that questioned the efficacy or safety of the vaccine. That experience should have shown all of us that the Liberal government of Trudeau was able to persuade corporations to censor the truth and amplify lies. When Canadians, we saw, finally got tired of this, they finally got tired of having their voices silenced by our politicians, the Freedom Convoy was born. Thousands of Canadians came together in Ottawa to peacefully tell our politicians and our government that we will not accept any more censorship or vaccine mandates. And when I arrived in Ottawa with my son Daniel and Stephen, right at the end of the convoy, it was the wrap-up. I saw with my own eyes how Justin Trudeau used force and violence to silence dissent. Now it is being put in a framework as a law to make it legal what he did. Now let's contrast what Justin Trudeau did during the Freedom Convoy with another peaceful protest in 1989 in Romania. Citizens were protesting government corruption. The Romanian president at the time, Nicolae Ceausescu, used military and police to crush this peaceful protest because it was embarrassing for him. It was an indictment of his leadership. And so he used what was supposed to be a force for protecting the citizens. He used it against his own citizens. Now, what was the result of that? Nicolae Ceausescu was found guilty of treason and executed on December 25th, 1989, for arguably doing something very similar to what Justin Trudeau did. I was at the convoy. I saw how people were being brutalized, how the police were dressed, how they didn't have their name badges, that they could act without any consequence, and they did. Many people were brutalized, and many had their rights taken away. And when the ability to resolve conflict with words is removed, violence becomes inevitable. We've seen with the assassination of Charlie Kirk that there are those who want to shut down free speech, even through violence. These murderers not only hate his ideas, but they hated him. Now this, and I don't hate anybody, but I do hate ideas, and I do hate opinions that take away individual freedoms, that undermine justice and degrade human dignity. And I believe we should not perceive individuals as obstacles or as being on the other side. Rather, we should say, I don't hate you. But I want to show you why your ideas and your opinions are hateful. And I think having charity towards anyone means willing to tell them difficult truths. Lies are hate. Even if the person saying them believes them to be true. Therefore, I believe the compassion we extend to others we disagree with is to win over hearts and minds. Ultimately, what is politics about? It's about winning over hearts and minds. Being able to convince people and persuade people that my ideas, your ideas are the correct ones. And if I'm wrong, I could be wrong on many things. I admit that. Show me. I want to listen to you. Tell me how I'm wrong. And you have to consider that in a heated discussion, most leftists, they won't listen, they won't remember your words, they don't want to. But what they will remember, in many cases, now our words and our ideas are very important. This is what will actually bring them over. But what do they remember? They will remember how they felt when they left the conversations. Now, Ben Shapiro, he was famously quoted as saying, "Facts don't care about your feelings." And I believe that to be true. But if another person's feelings certainly will impact how they are able to absorb facts that you may be giving them. So, now where is this attack by Justin Trudeau Liberals in the last little while and continuing right now with Mark Carney on our freedom of speech, religion, and thought taking our country? 80 years ago, fascists controlled speech. Communists also controlled speech in Eastern Europe. Now the same thing is coming under the veil of liberalism. Now the problem is this new communism that is already here under the disguise of liberalism looks different than the communism of the Soviet Union, China, or Cuba. That is why many people don't recognize the warning signs, or they believe that as one person they cannot change this system, or they don't want to jeopardize their comfortable life by speaking against the system that has given them their wealth and their lifestyle. You know, in the last two elections that I've been a candidate, many voters have asked me the question, what makes you different? Why do you want to become a politician? And it's simple. I think I have a simple answer. I believe that truth is important and that our country should be aligned with truth. I also believe that I will be judged by a power greater and more important than any human authority. And when that time comes, I want to be able to confess before God that I defended the vulnerable. I defended truth, and I stood for what is good, true, and just. You know, many men and women that I spoke to that have come from Eastern Europe or Cuba or China have lived under communism, and they can see that our society is moving in that direction, or at least a similar sort of totalitarianism. And I find it interesting when speaking to these people how frustrated they get that others can't see what is happening. You know, the elites and our elite institutions, they're abandoning the old-fashioned liberal principles based on defending the rights of the individual and replacing it with a creed that regards justice in terms of groups. It encourages people to identify with these groups, whether ethnic, sexual, vaxxed or unvaxxed, and to think of good and evil as a matter of power dynamics among these groups. So a utopian vision, for sure, drives these progressives and compels them to seek to rewrite history and reinvent the language to reflect these ideals of social justice. These utopian progressives are constantly changing the standards of thought. They don't have a moral framework for what it means to be progressive. They are progressing. Doesn't matter whether it's off a cliff or into a wall. They just want progress. but without a moral framework. And you can never be sure when those in power will come after you as a villain for having said or done something that was perfectly fine before. The consequences of violating these new taboos are extreme, including losing your livelihood, as Liz has talked about with her engineer friend. It was fine before. Now, this progress has brought us that people have to lose their jobs because they're not going along with this narrative. And under this guise of now diversity, inclusion, and equity, the left creates mechanisms for controlling this thought and discourse and marginalizes people who go against the narrative. And it classifies them as racist, misogynistic, or dangerous to our democracy. How many times do you hear that from the people who disagree with our ideas? One of the principles of the PPC is personal responsibility. The alternative is to abdicate your responsibility and delegate it out to your government, which, as we have seen, they are more than happy to do. It is not the job of government to make decisions about how you are to practice your religion or about what ideas you are allowed to hold. It is the job of government to protect our rights so that we can continue making those decisions for ourselves. Today's authoritarianism and totalitarianism, it demands allegiance to these set of principles and these progressive beliefs, which are incompatible with logic and certainly with Christianity or any other traditional faith system. Compliance now is forced less by government, but it's now forced by tech companies, corporations, and all these technologies that we have become very accustomed to, unfortunately, myself included. Now, in this post-Christian, post-national landscape, the ultimate dictator is able to make citizens believe that 2 + 2 = 5. And then history, and therefore truth, changes at the whim of the people controlling the narrative. The one who can manipulate history can manipulate truth. People who know who they are cannot be controlled. We can never forget who we are, where we came from, and what defines us as human beings, but also what defines us as Canadians. So, now the good news. When we choose not to live by their lies, we become empowered. A government that becomes authoritarian does not know how to react with ridicule or non-compliance. So we need to support every policy that empowers the individual and protects human dignity. Now, we are in a battle, and our weapons, our ideas, and our principles, but also one of our weapons is clarity, charity, compassion. And at stake is our way of life. I don't think that's too dramatic to say. Our culture, our will, and our souls, and our freedom. The weapon of our enemies, which is not people. Let's remember that. Remember what I said at the beginning. It's not individuals, but it's lies, threats, and fear. Anyone who becomes afraid is then blinded by fear. And that's why I think what Councillor Lisa was saying. A lot of these people, they just go along because it's first fear, and then they just go along, they comply, because they don't have the courage. The kind of freedom we all want is freedom from sin, weakness, and fear. This is the freedom that our Canadian soldiers who died for at the Battle of Normandy and in World War II, this is the kind of freedom that they fought for. I believe that the greatness of a person does not come from how much money they have, how much influence they yield, or how much education they have, but rather the greatness of a person comes from how much they are willing to sacrifice for others. Thank you.